I'm back. So, as I said, I'm in a basement and Wi-Fi is a little sketchy. So, we are chatting about cake this morning on Leftovercakechat, and I have chocolate cake and I have my champagne in a wine glass. So, we are going to get started. Laura, thanks for joining us back. We lost connection there. All right. Carrie, thanks for joining us back. Lost connection. Glad I warned you guys on that. So we're going to get started this morning, and if we can get Kristin added in here a little bit later, we will. So today we're talking about cake. We talked about cake previously, and welcome back, Barb. Previously we talked about, when we talked about wedding cake, we had talked about the difference in sizes and how many pieces you get from different sizes, and you also get different amounts of pieces from a square versus a round cake. So if you missed that conversation, make sure you check back at our blog. That is all in there. But today, when we're talking about wedding cake, we are going to be talking about the difference between fondant versus buttercream, some different decorations that you can do for the wedding cake. We posted some beautiful pictures on our Instagram and Facebook this week of some different wedding cakes that we had. So, all right, we are, again, bouncing back and forth. Good morning, Gail. Good morning, Laura. Thank you for joining. This is our second try. I got booted off the internet here a minute ago. So, chocolate cake for me this morning. Hopefully you guys have something yummy. I'm going to eat this. Drink my champagne out of a wine glass. And let's talk about cake. All right, so fondant versus buttercream. If you are not familiar with the difference, fondant is made out of, fondant, when you look at a cake, is that really smooth looking cover on the cake. It's basically made out of sugar, corn syrup, gelatin. It's difficult to cut through, and you can eat it. It's all edible, but because of the gelatin in it, it's very chewy, so I don't suggest eating it. Fondant is more for decorations and look versus anything else. So if you get a fondant cake, when you cut the cake to serve to your guests, you're probably going to peel off the fondant and the fondant on there. So Kristin should be popping in just a second. Yay! Good morning!
So I think I figured it out. Where?
All right.
Oh, good morning, everyone.
Kristin.
I knocked you off the internet because it brings me up as leftover cake chat. It won't let me change to me. So I joined as a different person. I their profile, like stalking people. If I do research, and that's what I'm here as. So anyway, going, and I don't.
Kristin, you are breaking up. Kristin, you're frozen and you're breaking up. So I'm not sure if it's your Wi-Fi or my Wi-Fi. I do see you holding a glass in front of me, and that's about it. So we were talking about fondant, and with the fondant cakes, you do want to make sure that you have a feeder piece in the, yeah, keep chatting, I'm going. You want to make sure you have a feeder piece when you are doing a fondant cake. And basically what a feeder piece is, it's a buttercream section that you can use when you're cutting the cake to make it easier for the bride and groom, because as I said before, the fondant is thick and it is gummy and it's very hard to cut through. And we just had a situation where the bride and groom didn't have a feeder piece to cut through, and then they were trying to cut it and then peel off the fondant, and it was kind of a disaster and a mess, and it was a little bit more difficult than it should have been to cut the cake and feed it to each other. So Kristin, I can see that you're not frozen, and I'm hoping that you can chime in on that.
You can hear me. I'm not moving.
And you went frozen again.
Scott here.
Well, I just enjoy having the picture of you in the top corner. It makes me feel like I'm not actually doing it alone. So that's pretty nice. So buttercream is just the frosting that's on it and it's decorated. It can be all different colors. They can add colors. They can do different tiers as different decorations as far as the buttercream. One thing that we do want to mention is if you are going to have a cake stand, you definitely want to try it in advance. Now, I definitely prefer a cake stand because if you don't have a cake stand, the the baker is going to put the cake on a cardboard piece that's wrapped in foil, and the individual, whoever's setting your cake out, is just going to take that and slide that on the table. So your cake would be sitting on the table. It's a nice looking bottom, but adding a cake stand that has a little bit of decoration will help. However, always the planners thinking ahead. We want to test the cake stand prior to. Again, another scenario that we've run into was the cake stand was bought by somebody and it wasn't tested prior to, and it was a little wobbly. So the cake on the cake stand was going to fall over. So we had to make the decision to remove the cake stand and kind of rig it up a little bit so that way we could use the pretty piece around the bottom. And so that way there was still some decor on it, but we weren't able to use it as the bride and groom wanted to use it because it just wouldn't work. So always test the cake stand. You can always drop the cake stand, the cake topper. A lot of the bakers will accept that and they will deliver it with the cake so that way everything's together and nothing gets lost. So if you give them the cake stand, they can always test it and make sure that it works prior to, or make any adjustments that are needed, or they can just say it's not going to work. Kristin, I saw that look. So sometimes you're frozen and sometimes you're not.
I'm just not moving. I move my eyes and I think maybe that won't make it freeze, but you know us and technology.
And you know what? It's working. We're doing pretty good. So we also are able to rent cake stands. So if you don't want to buy a cake stand because you're probably just going to use it that one time, you can also rent a cake stand. A lot of the bakers have different ones that you can utilize for that. So Kristin, now that you're not frozen at the moment, did I miss anything on that?
No, I just think, you mentioned the feeder piece. That's super important because, as you know, that's a key photography moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we just experienced was trying to cut that piece of cake and actually slide the cake out to feed each other, not me, but the bride and groom. And it was a challenge while everyone's watching and there's cameras on you. So, the feeder piece is probably super important.
Definitely. And when you are picking out your cake and you're doing that, it is going to be a focal point of the room. If you're inside, a lot of time they'll be able to set it out just before your guests enter the room. If you're outside, the cake is probably not going to be set out until right before you cut it. Melt, get things in it if you're like under trees and you don't have a tent or something like that. So it's more just to protect the cake if you're outside, not setting it out so early. But you do want to kind of get creative and look at pictures and figure out what you want. You can incorporate the colors of your wedding into the cake by either the frosting colors being slightly different in areas or in an outline design on there. You can also have the baker add different ribbon around the bottom of each layer of the cake and do that. We have also seen a lot of times adding florals to the cake for decoration. So you can add it between the layers. We posted a beautiful picture, I think it was yesterday, my days are blending together, of a cake with roses, white beautiful roses that were between each layer of the cake. And you can also add some greenery, anything like that that you have that you're utilizing in the florals in the rest of your event and or your bouquets. Kristin, what I miss?
Yeah, and I think too, for instance, the most previous cake that we've done, they actually had little edible flowers, which were just hard candied flowers that were floating off the cake. It was beautiful. So her colors were rose gold, silver, and gold. So there were 3 tiers of cake with that shimmer. And then it was fondant, as we know. And then the floating flowers were coming off it that were edible. So it was really pretty. So just another way to add flowers into the cake.
And I just saw we kind of talked about decorating each tier of the cake. You can obviously do different flavors of the cake. Each tier, different flavors. You can also decorate each tier a little bit different. And we just saw a beautiful cake done by Cakes by Carol in Key West. And they had the entire second tier done as a rope and tying the knot. A lot of times people will do that during the ceremony. They'll have a rope and they'll tie the knot, and it'll be kind of cute. But that was an adorable way to kind of bring in a nautical feel. It was a beach wedding, bring in a nautical feel to that wedding and incorporate that into the cake. It was gorgeous. So
I love the cake. That cake was great.
Yeah, good job to Cakes by Carol. That was beautiful. So we talked about flowers, ribbon, cake stand, different decorations, different tiers. Now, if you guys didn't know, as far as flavor of a cake, I would use chocolate. But not everyone likes chocolate, so I would probably do the bottom cake because it's bigger, chocolate, and then do different flavors going up. So that would be my suggestion. Kristin?
Yeah, and I'm not a big sweets person, so I do love me a little tiny cake pop, or I do love, the little tiny cupcakes, just because it's just that one bite. You know, I'm just not a cake person, which is funny on Leftover Cake Chat. But I will say that the cake the other evening, I think more than 75% of the cake actually went home with them. So in talking with a client yesterday, I did explain to them, they're having a brunch on Sunday after their wedding. So I said, well, in the case of like the last situation, you can at least serve that cake at brunch because unless you're going to go home and have a cake party after your wedding, just be cautious of how much you actually order, especially if you're serving dessert after dinner and then also having cake or a candy station or any type of additional sweets. We just say, obviously that's how this show was born, Leftover Cake Chat.
Always leftover cake. And I think what people don't realize is, I think a lot of times people will order more cake because they want the cake to actually be bigger and prettier and kind of stand out. That bottom tier doesn't have to be real.
Right.
Bakers will hate me for saying that, but that bottom tier does not have to be real. That can be just a filler that they have there. It can be decorated. It can be beautiful, but it doesn't have to actually be cake. So you can still, if you're having a smaller wedding and you still want a 3 or 4 tier cake just so that it looks beautiful in your pictures and that's what you've always envisioned, you can still get that, but you don't have to have the actual cake on each tier. Just don't try to cut the bottom tier if it's not real when you're...
That's styrofoam.
Yeah, make sure you let the groom know that's what you're doing. So
I think the last thing I'll say about cake is smushing, which is something is just not a fan of. Never really ends up going well. Someone gets upset. It's cute if you want to take a little tiny dip of frosting and put it on someone's lips, nose, but smushing is just not good. It's not good for pictures. It's not good for the fact that someone has just spent probably about $350 to $400 on makeup with, hair and makeup. And then has to go in the bathroom and wipe all that makeup off, all that frosting off, wipes all that makeup off.
Yeah.
So just, be respectful of it.
And then if you miss and it goes on the floor and you step on it and slip, that's no good either. Guys,
exactly.
We don't make this up. This stuff actually happens. When we say we've seen it all, that's not a challenge. That's just saying we've seen a lot.
Not hypothetical.
Yeah, definitely not. Okay, so I think that's what we're going to wrap up on cake today. There are 2 things I want to mention. Kristin did go over our love mission of the month last week. Oh, I wore my Give Me Some Space. We were talking about decor last week. So give me space to decorate. That's where I was going with that. But
Love it. Love it.
missed that. And so last week, Kristin mentioned our love mission of the month, which is Homeward Bound in Schenectady, New York. She did get that right. So anybody that does not know where that is, just north of Albany, which is the state capital of New York, and in Schenectady. Homeward Bound is very similar to Paradise Pet Rescue that we talked about in Key West. It's not a shelter. Basically, it's a group of people that take in dogs and they foster them, and they find people to foster them, and then they adopt them. So it's not a shelter. They need different things than a shelter would need, because they're bringing these dogs into their home until they can find a shelter, until they can find a foster, and then from there find an adoptive family for the dog. So if you are in the area and you can help either foster, provide some dog food, blankets, anything like that, please do that. If not, and you are able to get online and assist them with financial donations or something that's on their wish list, please also assist in that way. And another hometown. Wow. I didn't even know that. What a great connection. See? I also want to mention Kristin found on Facebook one of our previous love missions was Big Dog Ranch Rescue, and they are in Okeechobee. No, they're on Okeechobee Boulevard in Loxahatchee.
Oh yeah, that's the one I could not say.
Yeah. All these names really get to Kristin. But they actually, this morning or yesterday, somewhere in the last 24 to 48 hours, they boarded a plane and they are headed to the Bahamas to rescue 60 dogs. That is their mission. They are on their way. They could be there right now. So they will be bringing about 60 dogs back with them. And again, I'm sure they will need assistance, and Brittany's right down the street and I'm sure she will be there, but anybody else that's in the area that could also help, that would be great. Obviously, we know the devastation in the Bahamas from the hurricane that just went through. So please assist with them in any way possible, even if it's just going onto their Facebook and sharing their post asking for help. One person doing that, hundreds of people will see it from there. So we appreciate everyone's assistance with our love missions of the month. We hope that all dogs find their forever home, and it just makes everyone's life better, even the people. So, all right, Kristin, my champagne and my wine glass. And
yeah, I don't think you heard me at the start, but I'm not drinking champagne and I'm not eating cake today. I'm fasting right now, doing my clean energy drink from USANA called Rev. So cheers. I'm drinking with you in spirit.
Perfect. Well, I'll drink the rest of this thinking of you. So everyone enjoy their Sunday. Thank you for joining us on Leftover Cake Chat to chat about cake. And we'll have another topic next week. And tune in on Facebook and Instagram so you can figure out what that is and join us again live. 10 a.m. every Sunday morning Eastern time. Have a great week, guys. Bye.
Bye.